sure that there is a lot. I don't know the exact literature, but I think that that's a much better place to study this. Sorry, in the back.
If I were to respond to that question, I think what he's talking about is that the person has been able to speak a language which he has learned in his childhood and then forgotten, or sort of did not have practice of speaking for a long time, and then certain things happen and he started speaking that language. But it will never be a language that he has never ever heard or never learned. So it is a previously language that you've been previously exposed to. My question is, do you see a distinction between knowledge and ability?
Do I see? I think that, okay, let me, the answer is, I mean, as commonsensically, the answer is yes. You know, one is something abstract, so you know that the earth goes around the sun, while the other is something you do. So I know how to ride bicycles or motorcycles or whatnot. But the more, I mean, so the more extreme end of the embodied cognition enterprise, people are blurring that distinction. They're saying that knowing is a kind of ability. So to know how, so you don't know that the earth goes around the sun. What you know is really a process of engaging with teachers and so on, which has led to this particular outcome. So it's not an abstract fact that you have learned, but you have undergone a process through which not only have you learned that the earth goes around the sun, you have also learned that, you know, you say sir or madam at the beginning of the class, all these things. So, is there a distinction between ability and knowledge? Well, traditionally yes, increasingly no.
Computation would be part of ability?
Computation would be part of knowledge actually. That's the claim. It's an abstract claim, it's not an ability claim. So sorry, there's somebody in the front.
Knowledge of grammar would include the knowledge of reference of active or passive?
Not necessarily. It depends on which aspects of the grammar you are talking about. There would also be a sequence with which you acquire it. So it's not just, so the principles and parameters kind of approaches don't really tell you the sequence, right? So the fact that you acquire passive after active is not a principles and parameters thing, because principles and parameter basically would say you either have the active construction or you can flip it around and make it into passive. But why is it that one is acquired before the other is not really part of that scheme. So this is a more recent acquisition-centric view of language. So it's not, so the grammatical view of language where there is one sort of universal grammar with various rules is increasingly being replaced by an acquisitional view, which is that you have rules through which you acquire language rather than setting grammar from the beginning, like just as a flipped switch.
So but if we try to relate the usage, not computation, say that computation has to account for usage too. Then would it knowledge or be a historical fact rather than a fact of cognition, abstract cognition? Because there's, you know, usage would also be need-based. In every period of time, we have different needs. For example, in academic writing, we were taught, you know, you will use passive more than active. Yes. We were taught that, you know, using active in writing a paper is not a good idea. So that is need-based, and having knowledge of that fact is a historical fact.
Yes, but that of course tells you something about how the adult world works. It would be interesting to ask if there are children who are, I mean, anywhere in the world who acquire active after passive. But the more general answer to your question, not necessarily one I agree with, but the general Chomskyan answer to this question is framed in terms of what's called competence versus performance. Right? So competence is not based on usage. It's not based on needs. It's based on the abstract knowledge that you have, on the sense of how do you generate infinite amounts of sentences out of finite principles. That's the competence. Why I choose to say sir, ma'am in India and use first name somewhere else in the world is performance. Now, there is a deep reason why one should at least take that distinction seriously. Right? Because the principles The claim is that the principles are visible only when you abstract away performance issues. So,
I'm thinking about the definition of knowledge. If you take the traditional philosophers' definition, JTB analysis, Gettius analysis, that knowledge is justified true belief. And there are two concepts here are crucial. One is justificatory relations, and other is truth, the concept of truth. I want to know more about how the cognitive scientists are addressing this problem of truth and problem of justificatory relations in order to define knowledge.
see, that idea of knowledge, of justified true belief, simply doesn't work for human knowledge, right? Which is to say, my knowledge of grammar, my knowledge of vision, not knowledge, my actual experience, the capacity of my visual system to see objects, if you treat that as knowledge, and my capacity of my language acquisition device to know the grammar of my mother tongue, these are incapable of being justified. I have no conscious access to them, therefore I cannot justify them at all. I can't justify how I acquire knowledge through perception. Right? I open my eyes, I see the world in a story. So it's impossible to use that justified true belief view of knowledge into this at all. That's not what it is.
Okay, then the traditional division between opinion and knowledge is no more there in recent cognitive science.
That's not true, because the category of opinion itself doesn't exist, right? When I see, so if I see a rope, if there's a rope in front of me and I see it as a snake, it's not an opinion I have, I'm having an illusion or a hallucination. So opinion is only possible in certain kinds of knowledge which are embedded in rational processes, which anyway perception is not. Even a traditional philosopher will not theorize the rope and snake as opinion versus knowledge.